Good afternoon, everybody. As you can tell, I am not Bob. So he's on vacation, but even if he wasn't, he would not be presenting today's Tech Talk Monthly. No, Creation Station Monthly. I'm used to doing the weekly. Apologize for that. He's probably watching going, oh my gosh. Um, so we are doing Creation Station Monthly, and it is for Women's History Month. So, yay! So I have on my this way, yeah, I have on my right, I have Jamie, and down below, I feel like this is like the Brady Bunch or something. Down below, I have Aaron. So I'm gonna let them introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Jamie. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie. I have a storied and multifaceted career history, more like Laura, really. But I am a writer and a musician with a long history in collections and collections management, both recreational and professional.
Okay, Aaron.
Hi, I'm Erin Purdy. I'm the archivist supervisor for the Broward County Library Special Collections Department. And so I work in the Bienes Museum of the Modern Book and at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. And I've been working at the Broward County Library since 2017.
Yay! All right. So we're gonna get going. Oh, I gotta introduce myself. I'm so like everybody knows who I am by now. Come on. My name is Autumn. I am the community library manager for the North Lauderdale Branch Library in North Lauderdale, Florida. So the northern-ish part of Broward County. And I've been here about a year and a half, and I've been with Broward County for about 10 years. Yay, yay. So we're going to get started. We actually have questions. Somebody wants me to ask questions. Anyway, so starting, let's start with Aaron on this one. Tell me how you got into being a part of special collections, and is there any creativity in what you do or how you got there?
Oh, true. Okay. So I actually started working at a national park museum when I was in high school. It was kind of like this weird happenstance thing that, it was like a meeting in passing, and I ended up meeting the curator of that museum, and he took me under his wing, and I volunteered there for many, many years, all the way up until I graduated with my master's degree. I was actually working there with him. And along the way, I got a lot of other really cool experiences at different museums and archives. And I got a degree in public history with a specialization in archives. And so then I was lucky enough to land the job here at Broward County Library, and I really, truly love it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And, if you want to say more, keep going. We got time. Let's go.
Yeah. And so in terms of creativity, I have to do a lot of creative problem solving working at a public library, as Autumn probably is very familiar with. But it keeps it interesting. I love it. Like, I never feel bored, and I always have like lots of different tasks to work on and stuff like that. But a large part of my job is intaking new collections and then processing them. So I have to preserve them, I have to arrange them, and I have to describe them. So, because when people donate stuff to us, it's usually just like boxes of things that are very inaccessible and very mysterious to the public. And so it's my job to make sure that researchers have access to descriptions of our collections. And within that process, we have a lot of standard practices, and there's a lot of like unofficial rules for how you're supposed to process things, but every collection is different and every collection is unique. So within our rules and guidelines, there is a lot of room for creativity and, problem solving. So, yeah.
Awesome. How about you, Jamie?
Could you repeat the question, please?
No problem.
I was very engrossed in Aaron's answer.
Oh my God. Excellent. So how did you get started with your role in collections, both recreationally and professionally? And what kind of creativity do you use in said processes? That isn't exactly what I asked Erin. Close enough.
So it's a long and storied tale. I've always been a collector of both the tangible and the intangible. So I'm surrounded by my own personal collections of vintage plastics, radioactive materials, taxidermy, books, records, all sorts of things, stories, tales, dreams, anxieties, a collector of all things. But my degree is actually in English literature, and I ended up in collections management in this really funny roundabout sort of way, in which I worked largely academic jobs after I graduated from university, and worked with somebody who needed help sort of getting her arms around her recently deceased parents' collection of art and antiquities and books and things. So I went and helped her on the weekends, and then when a job came up with a this was not recent, this was several years ago, when a job came up with a local philanthropic organization that also had a large collection, personal corporate foundation, big multifaceted collection, she forwarded it on to me and said, I think this is something that you'd be very interested in. So I applied just sort of under the guise of an administrative assistant. Within a few years, I was managing a collection of 12,000 items, and it was my job to disperse them. That was sort of written into the paperwork of the job. So it required a lot of creativity to find, transport, locate, define all of these objects and sort of create a comprehensive database of this collection, and then work with not only auction houses but local and national organizations to find homes for everything. So it really was sort of like a giant game of Where's Waldo, followed by a giant matching game of finding the best place for the best thing.
Nice. So I know a little disclosure to our people watching, which we have people watching. So yay! I have, like I said, I've worked with Erin at Main Library, and Jamie and I have been friends, very, 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 very good friends for quite some time. So I know more about Jamie's work, honestly, than I do about Erin's. However, Erin always came in clutch when we had tours of children coming through the library, and she would always come out with some really cool stuff. So yay! That out of the way. Let's go with Jamie on this one. Did you change how you expressed being creative in this field, or is it just an extension of who you are?
That's a really sticky question, but I would say both. I mean, like Erin said, creative problem solving is the name of the game. Actually, a prime example, doing an installation. I just got a Google photo memory of this. I was doing an installation this time of year in 2018, and we had all unpacked all of these extremely, very, very delicate, priceless, one-of-a-kind artifacts. And we took off our aprons and dusted off and left for the day, only to get to the corner and realize that we were just a few blocks from Bayfront Park, and Ultrafest was starting, and we suddenly realized that the bass from the festival might very well sort of vibrate all of our priceless objects off the shelves over the weekend. So we had to go back, re-bubble wrap, creatively find nooks and places to stash everything where we knew they wouldn't go walking all weekend. So, I would say I have changed my creativity in this field because it is all about lateral thinking. It's very much all about lateral thinking and going, what can I call this? Where can I put this? If I were this object, where might I be? That was one that I asked myself an awful lot. But it is also very much an extension of the self, because learning the story behind these objects, I think, is also very important to me as someone who is like a writer and a storyteller and by trade. So really, it becomes getting to know the objects and sort of personifying them and wondering who made this, their life, like when they wrote this, when they created this. So yes, firmly both. Yes to both.
Okay, so your microphone is cutting out just a little bit, so you might want to switch.
Okay.
We got most of it. The majority of it. It's just it seems like it's getting a little sketchy.
Got it. Okay. Just are we still?
Oh, that went weird. No, I can't hear you at all. No. Oh no.
Now you're muted.
Oh, you're muted. Hold on. Can I undo that? Okay, so I don't have a mic on you right now. Oh no. Okay, so that is still a mute for you. Still muted. Oh no. Nope. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I can't hear you at all. It says you're muted, but what I'm going to do is we'll move on. We'll do this question for Erin. What I asked before. Did you change how you express creatively with this job, or is it an extension of yourself? Like, do you do in two different ways, or is it just all you?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I don't know. I sometimes I feel like I was like built for this job. Like, my family always we always had like a heavy emphasis on like do everything yourself and like be very practical and like very handy and stuff like that. And I always find myself like ending up having to use like various hand tools and power tools in the course of the job. I don't know. And then yeah. Sorry, I like lost track of the question.
It's okay. It's okay. So this is how you express yourself creatively in your job is just an extension of who you are, basically.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. And then
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Hey, let's see. I'm going to go with Erin here. What is the one thing or display or whatever that you have created that you're the most proud of, and why?
I think I've made an exhibit. I worked on an exhibit, and I contributed heavily to the research. I didn't contribute really to like the design or the final layout. But the exhibit was at the Cumberland Island National Seashore Museum, which is like located on the coast. Obviously, it's an island in Southeast Georgia, and I had to think like creatively, I guess. Like I had like this like paradigm shift in how I viewed the island in general, because my whole life I'd like grown up hearing stories about, oh, this island is like this like virgin pristine wilderness that's been like preserved and like untouched by human hands. And the more I like dug into the history of the island, I realized that, you know, there'd been people living on the island since like 5,000 years ago. Like the Timucua people lived there for 5,000 years. And so, of course, they had like a major effect on the ecology of the island, and like the animals that lived there. And they made the giant shell middens. And the areas on the island where those middens are, there's actually different plants that grow there, because when the shells break down, it's like really basic. There's a lot of calcium in the soil. So like even just like in the types of plants that are growing in different areas, you can see the effect that they've had. And then during the colonial era and the pre-Civil War era, there were hundreds of enslaved people that lived and worked on the island. They built like rice canals, and they had like cattle fields and cotton fields and indigo fields. And so like all that like changes, like there's like clear lines in the forest, and there'll be like a line where it's like on one side it's all pine trees and on the other side it's all oak trees, because they were growing different crops in different fields that were like clearly delineated. So anyway, after I like dug into this history, I realized like you can't tell the history of the island as it's this preserved, untouched virgin wilderness. You have to like kind of rethink about that history, and especially since the way that you tell that story covers up the history of these like marginalized people. So when the museum actually got destroyed during Hurricane Matthew. it got completely flooded. So they were like, oh, we're going to redo all the exhibits. So I got to sit in with the park rangers and like tell them all these like ideas that I had about the island and about how we tell the story of the island's history, because they kind of just wanted to like redo the same old story of like, oh, it's preserved and it's a wilderness, which is true to a certain extent. Like the Park Service is preserving the nature there, which is amazing, but there is this like deeper history there. And I got to share like many books with them, like lots. And like I actually went not too long ago and I saw the notes that I had given them. It was like 80 pages, and then it was like another 40 pages of like footnotes and bibliography. So
Awesome.
but anyway, so now that's a permanent exhibit, and like a lot of like the original writing that I did is like in that exhibit, and so thousands of people come and see it every year, and I think it made a really big impact on how people are thinking about that story. So that's the work that I did. I think I'm the most proud of.
Awesome. How about you, Jamie?
Question: is the sound any better?
Yes, much
Are we
better.
feeling all right? Okay.
Excellent.
Excellent. Worth the panic. I would say probably two of the coolest and most meaningful exhibitions that collections related projects that I've worked on was the organization that I used to work for built out a gallery at the Freedom Tower and another at University of Miami Special Collections to house these two large landmark gifts that they made there. And at the time I didn't really have the authority or professional capacity to like contribute in a meaningful way to the labels or really to the selection of the objects. But doing all of that background work was kind of a life-changing experience for me, doing the research, proofing the labels, sort of making my little tweaks in there, and then physically being the person on the ground and like having the honor and the pleasure of like opening up a historical building by myself at 4:30 in the morning and going in and working in these, freshly built out galleries for 14, 16 hours and just being the stewards of these priceless objects and artifacts. Most notably, we had a beautiful display of like a giant Audubon colored book, just this giant colored folio. So being able to sit there with my little linen gloves on and turn the pages and decide which birds would be the most compelling ones to show was really cool. And also working on a display at the University of Miami of polar and Arctic exploration materials was life-changing for me, particularly this copy of Ernest Shackleton's Aurora Australis, which was published in the field, and the front and back boards of the book were made of food crates, and the little leather closures were made of like strap leather from their sledge harnesses that their dogs pulled their goods on. So that was just everything that I worked with at that time sort of spoke to these enduring human qualities that we've had since the beginning of time, because they're, objects in there that went way, way back before recorded history all the way up to the early 20th century. So that was extremely cool and life-changing, just to sort of start as a passenger in this process, and then by the end of it to be the person who was sort of the sole custodian of those priceless objects was very humbling.
Awesome. I know for me, I don't do anything nearly as cool as you guys do, to be honest. So this is just fascinating to hear this. Okay, Jamie, how or what do you think society thinks of your field? And what do you think is a common misconception about what you do?
Well, my current capacity is a grant writer at a local art museum. So I think we know the current temperature on that in the United States. But what would be the most common misconception? I think the most common misconception that I get is that it is sort of like solitary, lock myself in a dungeon kind of work, and no one is to like talk to me or interrupt me. It's a beautifully collaborative job in which I get to work with other teams at the institution, most notably and relevant to this call, collections, curatorial, and sort of learn everything that I possibly can about their process, the thought process behind the initial exhibitions, and then being able to sort of craft that compelling story in hopes of securing funding to keep us going and to keep giving back to the community. So I think that would be the major misconception about what I do now. But regarding what I used to do in the actual on the ground collections management thing, I think the common misconception is that quite often when you see an organization, you think like they have it all together and everyone knows where everything is and everything is up to code. Everyone is laughing. We are all of the same vibe on this. But yeah, routinely someone would say, hey, I really need to see that sculpture. And I would go, okay, I have to go get the step ladder. I have to walk across the street to storage, roll up the shutter, put on my headlamp, dig this object out of the box, put it in a little milk crate, and then come back with it underneath my arm, as opposed to people thinking that it was in like some temperature controlled, beautiful stainless steel vault. So I think the main misconception with the management of a particularly large collection is that it is organized and that it is easy. A lot of work goes into it, and like I said, a lot of lateral thinking.
Okay, Erin, do you need me to repeat, or are you good?
Yeah, can you just repeat it?
Sure. No problem. How or what do you think society thinks of your field? And what do you think a common misconception is about what you do?
Yeah, I definitely love Jamie's answer. I feel all those things so hard. I think one of the major misconceptions that we have, especially at the Broward County Library Special Collections, is that you have to be like an academic or like some kind of like fancy special VIP person to be able to come view the materials. And I think that's one of the really special things, especially about working in an archive that's part of a public library, is we truly are open to any member of the public. That as long as you take the time to make a research appointment and figure out what you want to look at, everything in the collection is available for view. There's a few things that aren't, just because they're really, really fragile and we don't have a way to responsibly make them available to the public. But most of those things have been digitized and they're online and you can see them that way. So it's not like we have anything that's secretive or closed off. And I really wish the public was more aware of the fact that they can come in and view the materials in the collections. We've been doing a lot of tours and stuff. Yeah, and like Jamie was saying, I think a lot of people think this is really solitary. It's solitary work, and I spend a lot of my day talking to people. I talk to members of the public. I'm doing tours. I'm talking to researchers and working with them to figure out what they need. Yeah.
Okay. No problem. So, Erin, what sort of equipment did you start with, and how, or even just, equipment, how has that changed? And is there an ideal situation that you would like to be in, or stuff you would like to use?
Sure. So yeah, like I was saying, I started here at the library in 2017, and I would say the technology that we use in the special collections department has changed so much. It's changed so quickly, especially since 2019. They merged the Arlick and Maine special collections together to create the special collections department under the direction of James Jones, the collection manager, and collection management, the head of collection management. And he's just totally been the wind beneath our wings. When I started, we didn't have any way to make finding aids or to make them available to the public. So I was just making Word documents, and when finding aids, and when people would request things, I would send them the copy of the Word document. And in 2020, we got Archive Space, which is an online platform for me to manage the collections behind the scenes and location track things, but also it's online, so the public can view what's in every single file folder and how many photographs are in this collection, what are the photographs of. So that's just really opened the whole world up to us. And then also the digitization section has changed drastically since I've been here. Oh, did it just blur for everybody?
It just, yeah,
Mhm.
it just went weird. I'm not really sure
Yeah.
what happened. Not really sure. You're still frozen. Can you hear me, Aaron? Nope.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can hear you. Can
Oh,
you?
okay. You can
There
go
we
ahead
go.
and keep
Hi.
talking. Yeah, it's, oh
Okay.
my gosh. We're having all the fun today.
Yeah. But yeah, the digitization section's come so far. It was originally, we just had 3 part-time temps who were just scanning vertical research files, and they weren't actually scanning like archival collections the way that a museum or an archive normally would operate. They were just kind of scanning stuff as they went along, like by location, without any direction from like an archivist or a curator or anything. So like that slowly changed, but now we have a whole digitization team. We have a digital archivist, we have a digital initiatives librarian, we have 3 full-time digitization techs, and the technology that they use is like crazy. Like they have a specific scanner for slides. They have multiple 3D scanners. So we've been going in through specific collections. We did the like African artifacts collection first and 3D scanned those, and those are all online for the public to view. Right now, we're working through our WPA artifact collections. I actually have one right here.
Oh, cool.
So this is a model that was made by the Works Progress Administration of the Betsy Ross House. You can see it's like a row house, and it says WPA on the side. So this was made back during the 1930s by the Works Progress Administration. And it's part of the museum extension project, which was basically the government was funding projects for like artists, historians, and architects to create these models. And there were different people who would design them and people who would paint them. And then the idea was that they had catalogs of these that they would give to school teachers, and the school teacher could order the models, and they would have like visual aids for their classrooms, which is like really cool. But yeah, so those are all being 3D scanned right now. And we have like a giant Zuschel scanner, and we figured out how to do OCR really well. So one of the projects we're working on right now is we have the oversized Zuschel scanner, and we're using it to digitize the West Side Gazette, which is Broward County's oldest and largest Black newspaper. We're working in collaboration with the editor and publisher, Bobby Henry. He's a really cool dude. And anyway, so he's giving us the papers, we're digitizing them, and then we can OCR, we run like optical character recognition over the newspapers, and we have a complete, really like, I think it's like 95% accurate transcription of the paper. So all the papers are completely text searchable. So that project's ongoing right now. So yeah, we have, I don't know, like in terms of like what we want, like I've come so far, and like, you know, you can always dream, you can say, oh, I wish we had a better camera, I wish we had an even bigger scanner, but it's just incredible like what our team's able to accomplish nowadays. It's really, really cool.
That's awesome. How about you, Jamie? Anything that like what you started with, and what would be ideal to work with?
So what I started with was very interesting because the 2 of the collections that I've spent most of my time with, one of them, the main material that was our collateral was just receipts, decades and decades and decades of receipts in Mandarin, in German, in French, that we had to match to the objects. And it was just massive folios of receipts. And that was it. Nothing digital, all handwritten. Once you got into the 90s, a few of the receipts were printed, but a lot of them were from establishments that would be handwriting these receipts. So that was a very interesting process start to finish, and a lot to be said about like de facto handwriting analysis. But in the other collection I worked with, it was interesting because that collection had been around since the mid 1960s. So as I looked through these files, I got to see sort of like the histories of record keeping and the materials that were used over time. So I would go in one file and there would be, you know, big giant soft floppy disk. The next file I'd go in, a teeny tiny little slide for a slide projector. Then eventually when you got into the 80s, there were Polaroid camera photos, like old Polaroid photos that had like yellowed around the edges. So I really got to see sort of the history of all of their documentary materials that were used at this organization. And then eventually when you got into like quote unquote modern era, you would have sort of like reference sheets that told you where a little thumbnail photo was, or sometimes like high quality printouts. There were some objects that, not by the organization that I worked for, but our partner organizations did that 3D scanning as well. And that was like every holiday wrapped into one when we would get that 3D scanned file and we would all get to look at it. It was extremely cool. So I would say that every collection I've worked with has been resolutely low tech, extremely low tech, but in a really interesting and fascinating way. You know, there are no problems, only challenges. Puzzles, if you will.
Yeah, I would even say that like that's one of the misconceptions I see that like people who don't work in this field have is they think we have like these like high-tech ways to like preserve papers and to fix books, and like you're saying, it's all very low tech. It's like acid-free paper, try not to touch it. like you know, environmental control, and you know, there is like some cool stuff that conservators can do, but at the end of the day, a lot of our work is very low tech.
Yeah.
And I think that surprises a lot of people. They're like, can't you just put it in like a box and like you know, deacidify it? And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. We have to like carefully dust like chalk over it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There was a painting on wood in one of the collections that I used to work with, and one day we had a close look at it and went, that's a termite hole. So it had to be this very delicate, it was a Josef Albers painting, had to be treated for termites, and it was put into this like pressurized chamber, obviously offsite. We didn't just have one of those laying around, but it was one of those situations where it should have been like a 10-15 minute drop-off pickup, like, here it is, packed up nicely, please take it and fix it. And I said, no, I need you to tell me everything about this project from start to finish. I need to know everything. It was somehow ambiently frozen. It was pressurized and slowly repressurized so as not to crack the wood or disturb the layers of paint. It was a really fascinating thing.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, we're like, oh, this book is old. Bye. I mean, not like I'm talking like, oh, it's 10 years old and we've checked it out a lot. I'm not talking about like really old stuff.
I'm sure we've all had the shock and horror moment of finding something moldy in a collection and going like, contain it.
I wish mold was the worst thing I've seen on a book. Baby roaches. Ew, nobody likes that. Nobody likes to get a book returned and find bugs. That is disgusting. Okay. So, Jamie, when you were first getting started, whether recreationally or professionally in collections, what do you wish you had when you started, or knowledge, or even item thing?
When I started collecting, I think the best thing I could have had at the time would have been a smartphone. You know, I've been going to thrift stores and collecting since like the pre-smartphone era, the pre-flip phone era even, where there were so many times when I would see an object and think, is this important? Is this worth anything? Is this the thing that I'm looking for? And I would run home to the home internet connection, look it up, turn around, and it would be gone by the time I got back. So there were lots of regrets related specifically to not having the entire world at my fingertips at the time. So I think that would be the thing that I always wished that I'd had during, and obviously, I mean, still to this day, I wish I had an auxiliary storage unit. I wish I lived in a bigger house. I wish I had more space for the collections. I think every collection is at some point destined to outgrow its containment. And that, I think, and really even with the collections that I worked with professionally, space, always a commodity, because you can only shove so many books in that shelf. You can only stack so many manuscripts in that drawer. I think space would be my final answer on that.
Okay. How about you, Erin?
I remember, I think maybe just like a recognition that like very early on, I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted everything to be done to like the absolute highest standard. And, you know, like nothing in life is ever perfect, right? But so like over time, I've kind of had to be like, well, good enough is good enough, right? And I think that's like a lesson I definitely had to learn the hard way, especially because like my mentor that I mentioned earlier, who I worked with when I was in high school, he had extremely high standards and he was very old school. So it was like, and like I think in museums in the past, especially, there was like this hyperfixation on like perfectly getting everything to like the ultimate ideal level and like working very slowly. And like so like they would have like a few collections that were like perfectly processed and perfectly location controlled, and then there would be like this huge backlog of collections that like were unprocessed and unknown. And now we have like a very different philosophy in most archives, at least, where it's like at least get everything described at the collection level, get everything processed at the container level so that it's at least open and accessible to researchers and you know where it is, and nothing's ever going to be perfect. So I think, yeah, I wish I had like maybe had that knowledge, but that's something you acquire with age and experience.
Yeah. Age, experience, and age, yes, because it feels like you lose patience as you get older. You're like, that's okay, I'm done now. I'm finished. It's good enough. Okay, so, and you know, I would go with Aaron, but I know Jamie, this is a little closer, and maybe Aaron, yes. Can being a novice in this field, so meaning collections in a personal standpoint, obviously can lead to a career because and also, I mean, I know that Jamie, you have other stuff that you do outside of collecting. But has it helped get you to that point? Like your recreational collecting, did it help with your other creativity, with your other, like with the music or the writing or what have you? Because I know you do collect some instruments too.
That would be a fact. Yeah, gear acquisition syndrome is a very real thing. You know what they say, you collect every piece of gear under the sun just to play with the same rig every weekend. It's always the same thing.
True.
But it's nice to have the option.
There you go.
So does collecting inform my creativity? Is that a good paraphrase of the question?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite things to do is recreational research. So I will see an object, find an object, fall in love with the object, take it home, and proceed to stay awake until 3 a.m. learning about said object and everything about it. So, and then those little facts come in handy throughout. Shockingly, they do come in handy at some point. But I find it very inspiring. I mean, most recently, I picked up an absolutely beautiful mid-century Hull teapot, gold starburst, indigo blue, and it was there with about 30 other pieces of blue Hull pottery, mostly teapots. I fell in love with this one. I decided I couldn't live without it. China cabinet, don't listen. And I got it home. It was all taped up. It was all wrapped up. And when I opened it, I looked inside it and found a handwritten note from the person who had owned it.
Wow.
And I find that very inspiring when I sit down to write, when I sit down to, sort of think about music, because like I said, you are collecting the object, but in a lot of cases, you're collecting the story that goes with it, whether it's the story of how you got it, your crazy Craigslist journey down south to pick up a piece of taxidermy from a retirement village, which definitely not autobiographical on that one, but or sometimes you are actually handed the story on the platter. And how could that not be creatively inspiring to go like, I have this object that I know had a very long history before it came to me. But now I have a tangible piece of that history in someone's handwriting, and realizing that they had this sort of unified collection. Was there a note in every single one? So I do find it very creatively inspiring, of course.
Cool. And Aaron, I don't know about your creative pursuits outside of your career? But if you do have them, does what you do help inspire that?
I would say it's related. I don't know if it's like directly inspiring. My main hobbies are sewing and cooking.
Okay.
But I do historical sewing, and I love sourcing the original fabrics and like going to museums and like figuring out how did they fix this like one little seam right here, and like what an interesting shape of like the back pattern piece and stuff like that, and then like counting like how many hand stitches per inch, and it gets a little bit intense sometimes. But just in term, and I also am like, I'm not a collector myself, but I work with collections, and in the museum we have artificial collections like the Dwayne Sears Big Little Books collection. So a gentleman, Dwayne Sears, just fell in love with like these big little books, and they're so precious and tiny. They're like children's books. A lot of them are from the 1930s, and every page is like individually illustrated, and he just fell in love with them and found them so charming, and he collected over 500 of them. So now we have one of the largest collections of Big Little Books in the United States, and it's all available to the public here, which I think is really special. But another collection that I've fallen in love with lately is the Dorothy Porter Wesley collection. We have Dorothy Porter Wesley was like a librarian, and she started working at Howard University, the historically Black college, or university actually, in 1930. So this was like at like the very beginning of the Harlem Renaissance, and she started working there, and she realized that under the Dewey Decimal System, it had a really limited way of cataloging books about Black history and like about Black people and by Black authors. And so she actually had to create like a new classification system that reflected like the true breadth of all those subjects, like the hundreds and hundreds of subjects that were held in the Howard University Library. So, and she got a lot of pushback on her classification system, and she found a way to publish it anyway. So she was this really radical pioneering librarian. But at ARLIC, the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, we have her personal library that she collected, and it's over 3,000 books, and it's just absolutely incredible and so inspiring. And because she was a librarian, she was corresponding with like these researchers all over the country, all over the world. There was hardly a book on Black history that got published in the mid 20th century that she's not in the acknowledgement sections. Thank you for your help with my research. And so a lot of the books have inscriptions from like these major authors, major historians, and they're all thanking Dorothy Porter Wesley. Sometimes there's letters, sometimes there's card catalogs, which I just love because she was so obsessed with cataloging and everything. And I don't know, just like book plates, from different, like from Lula Allen, who was like one of her mentors. A lot of the books have that book plate on the cover. And so it's like her book collection tells this story of like this giant network of like research and like radical thought that she was a part of. And librarianship, she didn't leave behind a lot of letters, and she didn't leave behind like an autobiography. And I think librarianship is like kind of like an unsung profession, and we're not the ones publishing the books in general, but I just love like how her personal library like documents all these like incredible, amazing stories. So that's a collection I've just really fallen in love with lately, and it's so inspiring. Like it just makes me like want to get back and like into doing research, and just to be as helpful as I can to the researchers that we have here.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Do you have any favorite collections or any special item, Jimmy, that you're just like,
well.
Where's Carl? No.
I didn't get Carl, but I brought another friend.
Okay. Let's see.
So again, the more I thought about it, show and tell. The more I thought about it as I listened to Erin's answer, I sort of considered that some of my favorite objects are really the ones that do not have a history. They're very, sort of murky objects. So one of the many things that I do collect is taxidermy, all secondhand, all vintage. I don't commission it. It's just I see I see an animal when I'm out and about, and I can't say no. I'm definitely a friend of the raggedy animals, including the living ones. So this is a very perplexing, inspiring, and almost a little bit heart-wrenching object that I've been in possession of probably since maybe 2014, 2015. And I've never seen anything quite like it. This is a teeny tiny, itty bitty taxidermied lamb. Hello. Hi there.
Oh, the little face.
Please look at this little darling. So I've been in, and I've done everything I can to see. There are no markings on it. There are no tags. Nothing is inscribed. Nothing is signed. But every time I look at this like sweet little creature, it does sort of get the creative juices going of like, somebody loved you before you were even born. Somebody loved you so much that they wanted to keep you forever. And how on earth did you end up behind the counter at my local thrift store next to a tattered mink stole, you know? So this is definitely a favorite object that always gets the wheels turning. And, you know, every so often, you know, things pass through hands, and I do feel like they sort of take on a little bit of like the spiritual energy of the people who owned them. So sometimes objects just feel a little bit ensouled, and this one feels cryptic and ensouled. So this is definitely a favored object. I've got, like I said, I collect a lot of things, so I have a lot of favorite objects, but that is one that I thought would be good for show and tell today just because it was very out there.
I don't think I've ever seen that. I've never seen that before.
Should we tell them who Carl is? No.
No, they don't know who Carl is.
So another creature
Carl.
another creature in the secondhand zoo is probably, if he were uncurled, he'd probably be about a 4-foot long alligator. Again, that was just at the thrift store. And when I worked at a medical school, he lived in my office. A lot of the students weren't local, so they were very charmed by him. So Carl is another sort of creature, object, beloved thing in the collection. And actually, I circling back on it, I do have one more cool show and tell thing.
Yay.
I didn't want to take this too literally when you said, like, what kind of supplies do you need when you're out in the field? But
all of it.
Major, absolutely. And one of a tetanus shot. True. One of the objects that was indispensable to me in one of my favorite collections, which is sort of like uranium infused glassware, is a black light. So I figured we would do a quick little fluorescence show, because for many years when I was getting the handle on the different shades of green, you would find me on hand and knee at the thrift store flashing a black light at everything. Just goes to show that there is a dual purpose for everything.
Okay, that is so neat. Well, we're coming to the end. If there's anything you guys want to promote or say or whatever, talk to each other, let's go. Let's do it. Let's do it. Or not, whatever, it's fine. It's totally fine.
I mean, I would say just for the general, I mean, go out and visit your local libraries, visit and support your local institutions, your libraries, your museums, your archives. There are, you know, more community archives in your local area than I'm sure you are aware of. I'm sure there are more small museums and more public library branches with more programming than you could ever imagine. So just do the search, enrich yourself, enrich your life, and support these local institutions.
Support your library. Yeah.
Come on now. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I know I teach onboarding for the county. And when we come across a photo of ARLIC, our African American Research Library and Cultural Center, I tell them, I'm like, you have to go, because they have amazing museum space. The archives are fantastic, and their programming is insane. Like, the things, they'll be like, oh, we're doing this week. I'm like, how? So you have a very special job, Erin, both Maine, but especially ARLIC, especially.
I love working at ARLIC, and I can't even tell you how many programs I've been to there already, and I've just cried just because I've been so moved, like in both, like in so many ways. Like it's just really cool to see like the community around the library, and also I want to give a shout out. We have a very We have probably the best exhibit that Arlex ever had on exhibit right now on the first floor in the museum. It's called Reveal the Beauty, the Art and Literature of the Harlem Renaissance, and it's only up until the end of July. So I want to encourage as many people as possible to go out and see it. It's a really, really incredible exhibit.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
The 100th anniversary of the start of the Harlem Renaissance this year. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. Nice, nice. So yes, definitely go and visit our African American Research Library and Cultural Center here in Broward County. As you heard, until the end of July, there is an amazing exhibit up. They always have amazing exhibits, but this one is really special. So please make sure to stop by and see it. If you aren't in the area, come and see it. Our weather's usually great. Usually. I'm looking out my window right now and I'm like, well, that just looks like trash. But usually. So, okay, guys, this was great. This was fun. So, for anybody watching later on this week, we will be doing Tech Talk Weekly, and it will be me again. Yay. It'll be a slightly different format if you haven't watched it before. So please join us. And at the end of April, yes, April. I'm like looking, what month is it? At the end of April, join Bob. I don't remember what it's about or who's coming, but it'll be fun. You'll figure it out when you tune in. It'll be great. So thank you, Jamie and Aaron, for joining us today. We had a wonderful, well, I had a wonderful time. I'm saying we like I'm talking for you guys. I had a wonderful time. I don't know about y'all.
I had a great time. This is wonderful.
Yay! Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye guys. Thank you.